let's transition now, okay? Because the last topic on the order of the day for this conversation is this concept of MAGA communism. So I know that there have been Twitter exchanges, there have been, unfortunately, name calling, which I found to be just not in good taste. But let's talk about the idea, okay? Because, we both consider ourselves socialists, not socialists as in small d democratic socialists, but socialists in the tradition of communism and Marxism. So I want to know your thoughts about this. And perhaps, let's just throw out maybe like a devil's advocate question. I addressed this last night on my stream. It isn't for me. I don't need, I'll definitely comment what you have to say, but I don't need to open with a big introduction about my opinion on it. But let me just ask you a question. So a lot of the criticism against our position and in your position in particular is, well, you don't want to go to the working class whites. You don't want to appeal to them. You don't want to try to win them over to communism. What would you say, or you don't want to unite them, should we say, against the forces of globalism? I don't even want to use that term. Let's just say global capital for our sake. The deep state. You don't want to do that because you're not willing to engage with MAGA. What do you have to say to that?
I mean, it's ridiculous on so many levels. Just a few things. First of all, globalism doesn't exist. It's a right-wing buzzword. It's called imperialism and capitalism. And we have to have a scientific economic understanding of what imperialism is and how it operates. Globalism is a term that obscures that and tries to separate imperialism from capitalism. And if you try to do that, you can't understand what's actually happening. Second of all, the idea that I'm not interested in challenging the deep state is very funny and hilarious because I, at Multipolarista, in fact, have a series with the leftist historian Aaron Good, a Marxist influence historian, and it's called Empire and the Deep State. And it's a history of the U.S. empire and the U.S. deep state from a materialist, socialist understanding to actually grasp at what the deep state is as the reflection of the U.S. capitalist class, of large corporate oligarchs, of capitalist interests driving the interests of the U.S. state and the U.S. empire. If you try to separate capitalism and a materialist understanding from imperialism and the deep state, all you're going to do is end up getting weird right-wing racist conspiracies about Jews or the Illuminati or whatever. Like that, we need to have an actual understanding. Now, let's talk about this idea of so-called MAGA communism. It's ridiculous on so many levels. First of all, we need to separate this whole idea of the so-called white working class from MAGA. First of all, the working class is not white. The working class has no race. The working class is international. There are white workers, but the white working class, it does not exist. There's no white working class. There is a working class, and there are white workers, and there are black workers, and Asian workers, but it is a working class, right? The idea of going after the white working class, that's another form of identity politics. Why are you trying to appeal specifically to white people? You should appeal to workers on a working class basis. The idea that I don't know anything about white workers is absurd. My family's from Ohio, from Cleveland, Ohio, which is a deindustrialized area. I went to school in Kentucky. I know these parts of the United States quite well, right? Okay. MAGA is not a political movement. MAGA is not a movement. MAGA is a campaign slogan created by Donald Trump, quite literally on a hat, a merchandising slogan used to run for election as U.S. president, which is the commander-in-chief of the U.S. empire on behalf of the U.S. capitalist class. There can never be anything progressive, yet alone revolutionary or anti-hegemonic or anti-systemic about MAGA. Quite literally, it is a campaign slogan linked at the umbilical cord to Donald Trump. When they say MAGA, they mean we support Donald Trump. You can't separate that from Donald Trump. He literally coined the term. He literally put it on his hats that he sold in his campaign site and used it to run for president. Okay, now let's talk about Donald Trump himself. The idea that all white workers in the United States support Donald Trump is preposterous. It is completely ridiculous. All right, in 2016, in the presidential election, there was 56% voter turnout. 56% voter turnout. That means 44% of eligible voters did not participate. That's not including the large numbers of people in the United States who have been disenfranchised, especially disproportionately black people. Okay, 46% of the 56% turnout voted for Trump. That's 63 million people. That is 25% of adults in the United States voted for Donald Trump in 2016. In 2020, there was 67% voter turnout, so a little higher, and 47% voted for Trump. That's 28% of US adults. So in both elections, we're talking about just around 1/4 of people voted for Donald Trump. Okay, why are we not talking about the 44% of people who did not vote in the 2016 election? I think that that's a much more opportune base for people to recruit if you're looking to try to build socialism, to build a movement outside the two capitalist imperialist parties. Why are these opportunists only trying to go after people who support Donald Trump? Because it's not political for them. They don't actually believe this, I think, in many senses. This is strictly grifting. It is opportunism. They're making money off of it. They recognize there's a large base of right-wingers who have a lot of money, because another part of this is that the people who voted for Donald Trump were not disproportionately working class. On the contrary, they were disproportionately upper middle class in wealthy suburbs. On average, they were more affluent than people who voted Democrat. Now, I'm not supporting voting Democrat. I've never voted Democrat. I have never supported voting Democrat. I have an established record of this going back much longer than the so-called MAGA communists, many of whom were Democrats quite literally 3 years ago, running for office on a mainstream liberal democratic platform, literally in 2019. Okay? So why are we not talking about the tens of millions or potentially over 100 million people in the United States, working class people who are disenfranchised, who don't believe in the political process, who recognize correctly that both ruling class capitalist imperialist parties do not serve their working class interests? Why are people instead doing a reverse lesser evilism? And this, to me, Danny, is incredible, because what they're doing is exactly what the social democrats were doing in the past 10 years, is to say we have to vote Democrat because they're lesser evil. All these so-called MAGA communists, who are not communists in any way, according to any consistent definition of the term, they're not even socialists. These people are doing the exact opposite. They're doing a reverse lesser evilism. They're saying that we should recruit among Republicans. We should basically cater our politics to the Republican Party and say that the Republicans are lesser evil and tell people quite literally to vote for Donald Trump. That's what these so-called MAGA communists are doing, literally. They're saying vote for Donald Trump. This is the exact polar inversion of the pro-imperialist liberals like Vaush, who say vote for the Democrats every year, vote for Joe Biden. They're the polar inversion of each other. Ironically, they're both patriotic so-called socialists who wag the genocidal U.S. flag and talk about how great the U.S. is. They're quite literally polar inversions of each other. That's why I've mostly avoided this. It's a distraction. They're not serious. They're not socialists. They're certainly not communists. What they're trying to do is redefine communism and redefine socialism to say that actually we're conservatives, but we're also communists. What are you talking about? They're actually just redefining communism. They certainly have no theoretical understanding of Marxism and Leninism. Give me a break. They're redefining even socialism to make it the same as conservatism and say, oh, we're just conservatives. And of course, at the end of the day, they're profiting from it. These people are profoundly unserious. They're not a member of a party. They're not a member of an organization. They don't believe in collective action. They believe in their own personal brands to make money, to sell gold, quite literally, to do ads to sell gold alongside Steve Bannon and Ron Paul for this company called Birch Gold. This is not a project for political transformation, and it's profoundly unserious. And that's why before and after, I have refused to engage with them. Today, I wanted to engage with this ridiculous concept, but after this, I'm just going to ignore it because it's all grifting. It's not a serious political tendency.
And even if, in my opinion, right, like for me, we can obviously see, and I think a lot of what you brought up is that it is totally reasonable to assume, right? Especially with some of the actions and especially the name calling and then all of the ways that this has been approached, right? Can definitely get the sense that this is not serious.